Thank you for taking the time to listen to today's episode. As you know, the current crisis in Myanmar is extremely concerning, and we appreciate that you're taking the time to be informed about what's happening. There's value even in just becoming aware and helping to inform others. So please consider sharing this episode so that more people may learn about what is really happening in the country, as it's critical to ensure that this issue remains present in the public discourse. For now, let's get on to the interview that follows. You're listening to the second episode in our ongoing series titled Love Letters to Myanmar. For those who have been following along our podcast journey, you know that before February 1st, our shows were designed to showcase the themes of meditation, spirituality, and Buddhist study related to Myanmar. Following the coup, however, we felt compelled to transform our platform to respond to the current state of emergency that has since gripped the country. The topics that we have covered and the stories that our guests have so vulnerably been sharing are admittedly heavy. It's critical that our platform be able to bear this weight as we support and amplify those voices who want the world to know their reality, so we are all better informed about what is really happening in Myanmar. However, as important as it is to bear witness, hearing repeated tales of inhumanity, cruelty, and loss can take a toll on one's emotional and mental reservoirs. We hope that this new series can provide a kind of counterbalance to our recent run of episodes. In this show and the ones that follow, guests will be sharing their warmest memories and anecdotes, discuss what life lessons they have learned from their time in Myanmar, and talk about the role that the country and culture has played in their lives. We'll be checking in with meditators, teachers, scholars, aid workers, exiles, diplomats, celebrities, and many more to showcase how widely the influences of Myanmar has touched people from such diverse backgrounds. This episode, called Home is Where the Heart is a mere image of the first episode in the series. That one told the story of three non-Burmese who were deeply impacted by their time in the country. In this one, we hear from three Burmese speakers who talk about leaving their homes at a young age in order to settle in a foreign country with their families. They reflect on the influence of their native culture. Our guests include Yimon, whose family went to Japan, Peng, whose family went to Norway, and Lily, whose family went to the United States. They describe the challenges of adjusting to the new countries and cultures while holding on to the values of their homeland, and how the Buddhist teachings have guided their lives even after settling into lands where few around them follow Buddhist principles or have a daily meditation practice. They close by sharing their thoughts and feelings in following along with the protest movement from afar. Before we hear from our guests, I want to take a moment to thank Ashley Lewin, a Burmese American friend who conducted these three interviews, for her stellar job behind the microphone. Her curiosity, engagement, and active listening made me feel like I was right in the room with Ashley and her guest, and I think you'll feel the same. Finally, we want to reaffirm that the Love Letters to Myanmar series is not intended and should not be seen as an escape from the current circumstances in Myanmar, especially for those of us now listening from places of freedom and safety. It is to help re-ground us all in why we care so much about this country in the first place. I hope these shows can aid us in keeping our hearts firmly rooted in the Golden Land, while also providing a sense of renewed energy and purpose as we face the latest developments. With that, let's get into the show.
Hello, Yimun. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's good to have you here. So I would love to hear a little bit about you, a little bit about your background and who you are.
Sure. My name is Shimon, and I was born in Yangon. I'm a Chinese Burmese, grew up in Myanmar, so I was a minority. My first language is Burmese, and I used to learn Chinese when I was little. I finished high school in Myanmar, and then I left the country when I was 17. My whole family moved to Japan, and I lived there for 14 years. And then we moved again this time to the United States a few years ago. Now I'm working here. My time in Myanmar was very simple. I was a kid, I was a student, and it was an ordinary life of a kid from a middle-class family, nothing exciting. And I'm from a strict family, and I feel like they're a little overprotective sometimes. I wasn't allowed to go out with my friends that much, and I wasn't allowed to go on overnight school field trips. So when I was there, I would say my life was quite boring. It was like school, and then after school classes, do homework, study, and just a repetition of that. I don't really remember being very happy as a kid or a teenager. I was a quiet girl and a good student, but I didn't complain much when my parents didn't let me do things that other teenagers do. So when I left my country, I didn't know many places or even many kinds of food. I only started to learn more about Myanmar after I have left the country. I used to work as an announcer, radio announcer in Japan. So I had to introduce about my country, my culture to Japanese people, to the listeners. So I had to study and learn more about my country only after I have left my country. And then, although I didn't know much when I was there, I always loved my country, the culture, and the people. Especially the people. Myanmar people are really friendly, easygoing, generous, kind, and warm. And they also have a good sense of humor too. They can find something to love about even during a hard time like this. That's something I like very much about my people.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. Well, I have so many questions now. The first thing is, I'm not sure if listeners know that there's quite a big Chinese population living in Myanmar. I know that my own grandparents migrated to Myanmar from China on my mother's side during World War II. So I wonder if that was about the same time that your family migrated to Myanmar from China.
Yeah, I think so. My grandparents from both sides are from China, and I'm the third generation born in Myanmar.
Wow. Yeah, that's wonderful.
Actually, my parents, my dad was working in Japan since I was like 8. He left the country before we did.
Yeah, I wonder, once you got to Japan, did you miss anything about Myanmar?
My friends. I was a kid, so yeah. When I got to Japan, I didn't have any friends there. I didn't learn Japanese before I leave, so it was a whole new world for me. And I didn't have any friends. I went to a Japanese language school, and there were a lot of people from all over the world, and we don't speak the same language, so they also don't know Japanese. I don't know Japanese. I didn't know Japanese as well, so it was a little bit difficult for me to make friends. But yeah, so at the beginning, the thing I missed the most was my friends.
Yeah, I can imagine as a teenager, you've developed, strong friendships over the years with high school friends, middle school, elementary school friends, and moving to a whole new place, I imagine, was pretty challenging. to integrate. Yeah.
A story that came into my mind is something related to 1988 revolution. I was only 4 at that time, but the incident was very big, so I remember it quite vividly. One day I was at home and there were a lot of people on the street protesting and chanting loudly, and my house was the second house from a big avenue, so I could see them and hear them clearly. Then my grandmother came to me holding a bag of some items and bombs. So then she took me out to the streets, put some small bottles of bombs into my hands, and told me to give them to the protesters, random people. I don't know those people. And then as a kid, I didn't know what was happening.
I'm curious what the bombs were used for.
It's like ointment. You apply it on your injuries.
Oh, I see. Yes. Uh-huh.
Yeah, so I give those bombs, ointments to the protesters. As a kid, I didn't know what was happening there. I didn't know why those people were shouting and walking in a big crowd. I didn't understand what they were chanting. One sentence that I remember is "Democracy ye do ye do ye," which means we want democracy, we want democracy. But I didn't understand that at all. I didn't understand what democracy was, and I think I didn't ask either. But I chanted with them because it seemed fun for a 4-year-old kid. But the reality I didn't see as a kid was really cruel. There were a lot of killings, shootings in 1988 revolution, but I didn't remember those things. All I remember was that I grew up living under the impression that speaking about politics is a taboo. It's not allowed. My parents taught me not to speak about politics in public, to not have interest in politics, and to stay away from police and soldiers so that I can be safe. And I didn't question, but I just followed. Like in military, like in army, I just followed the orders, and I grew up like that. I never questioned. And I was scared when I saw a policeman or a soldier. I was scared of them. I was scared of their guns. I was worried, although I did nothing wrong. I grew up with fear. I don't mean that all the police and soldiers are bad. There are good ones, I know that, but I was afraid. That's the impression I had. And after I got to Japan, I started to notice that police and soldiers are not the people we are supposed to be afraid of unless we did something bad. And also in the United States, people love them. When they see them, they say, "Oh, thank you for your service. Thank you for protecting us." And when I see that, I really want our military, our police, our army to be like that, to be loved by the people. And I hope my wish will come true one day.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, especially about your early memory. I very much relate to that. I think I was 2 years old during the 1988 uprising, and it also happens to be my first memory, standing in front of the house, eating a banana and hearing the same chanting and trying to chant along with the people and just feeling the energy of the crowd. And maybe you can relate to this is, now when I hear that chanting, I get chills. It really provokes something very visceral in my body when I hear it. Yeah. I think you can be arrested, right, for talking about politics or even mentioning Aung San Suu Kyi's name at one point.
Yeah, you're right. And we should not be having their pictures. Aung San Suu Kyi's picture and her father, Bujo Aung San's picture at her house. If they find out, it's going to be a big problem. We can be arrested.
Yeah, so I'm curious how all of that impacted you growing up.
When I was there, I thought that it was It was natural. I mean, like, that's all I knew. I didn't know anything except that. So that was normal for me. I just found out that we didn't have our rights until I got out of the country and I saw the world. And only after that I realized that we have been losing our rights, our basic human rights. There was no freedom of speech, freedom of expression, and also we didn't even get our basic needs like electricity. We got only a few hours. We could only use electricity for a few hours during the day, but it was normal for me because I didn't know anything else. That's all I knew, and that's very sad.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember that times when you would go to pay for your electricity bill, you had to pay the person at the office money on the side just for them to receive your money for your bill. Yeah. Yeah. So I wonder, having spent 17 years in Myanmar, how did it impact the rest of your life up to this point?
I would say it had a good impact on me in some ways. One thing I would say is the religion. As you might know, the majority of Myanmar is Buddhist, and we have so many monasteries, pagodas, meditation centers. And I grew up as a Buddhist, relatively a religious Buddhist. And a lot of people send their children to monasteries to become nuns or monks or yogis during the summer holidays to learn the teachings of Buddha and meditation. And in my case, I wasn't like sent by my parents. I chose to go. When I was 13, one of my close friends asked me to join her to become a yogi for a week during the summer holiday. And my mother was supportive, and I decided to join her. It was like it was going to be a new experience for me away from the family for a week. It was not bad, so I was excited. And then the first few days were really tough for me. We had to wake up around 4:30 a.m. in the morning and then get ready to go to the hall of meditation. Then we meditate for about an hour or so, then have breakfast around 6 something. And then we got a break for like an hour, and then we started meditating again until lunchtime, which was around 10:30, 11. And then we had to finish lunch before 12 because all the yogis, nuns, and monks are not supposed to eat after 12 p.m. until the next sunrise. We had to meditate the whole day with a break in between until like 8 p.m. or 9 p.m. I don't remember exactly, but yeah, it's around 8 or 9. And so the schedule was really tough, and I wasn't happy at all at the beginning. But then a senior nun moved me and my friends to a group where we had to learn Dhamma, which is a concept generally known as the teachings of Buddha. So we studied most of the time during the day, and then we had to meditate only for a few hours. To be honest, I didn't like meditation at that time. I was just a kid, and meditation was a little bit hard for me. And then I wasn't very happy at the beginning, but after moving to this class, I enjoyed my time there. So we had to really study and take exams, and I started to enjoy the life there since then. I was really interested in Dhamma, and the exams also motivated me to study more and get prizes. And I ended up spending the whole 3 months of summer holiday there. I was a yogi at the beginning, and then after a few weeks, I decided to shave my head and become a nun. And I passed up to level 5, and I got a good foundation, which helped me study further about Buddhism and Dhamma throughout my life. I learned how to meditate, and meditation helped me a lot in my life whenever I face all the ups and downs. Like I told you, I moved to Japan when I was 17, and I started working right after as a waitress. I think it was after 3 months I started working when my Japanese was very limited, because I only started learning Japanese when I got there. So I faced a lot of bullies, depression, anxiety, and Dhamma was my rescue. I always listen to Dhamma talks even now, and I try to practice as much as I can. It gives me peace. It helps me control my anger, fear, greed, jealousy, and all the bad emotions, so I could become a better person thanks to Dhamma. And when I was in my mid 20s, I really had a hard time at work, where I faced power harassment and bully from my boss. That time I had depression. I thought I was useless. I had anxiety, and I even sought professional help. The doctor gave me some medicine to make me relax, but that wasn't a real solution. It only made me sleepy, and I was like on the clouds. It was like forcing me to be calm, but the side effect was that I couldn't think clearly. I wasn't productive, I wasn't active, so I stopped seeing that doctor, and then I started to look for a better solution in Dhamma. I listened to a lot of Dhamma talks, and it helped me to pull myself together and get out of a depressed and anxious state of mind. So, being mindful of what you're thinking will help you a lot. It will stop you from thinking negatively. And I'm very grateful that I was born in Myanmar and I know Burmese language, because Myanmar is a country where you can find really great monks, great teachers who teach Dhamma very well. You have so many options. If you don't like the way a monk or a teacher teaches, you can listen to someone else. There are so many options, and you can learn a lot easily. And there are so many techniques, and yeah, you have choices. And if you like reading, you can also find so many books written in Burmese. So I feel very lucky to be born in Myanmar and had a chance to meet and practice Buddhism. I think I'm a better person thanks to Dhamma. And another thing that I learned from Dhamma is that I became to be able to see people as they are, despite of the color, ethnicity, or religion that they believe. I grew up among the idea of discrimination, gender stigma, and superstitious ways of thinking. But as I learned deeper and deeper about Buddhism and Dhamma, it took away those ideas. So that's something I am really grateful for, being a Burmese, being a Myanmar.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I think you are very fortunate to have had some foundations in Myanmar, spending 3 months and really developing a deeper understanding of Dhamma and practice of meditation that has carried you on over the years. Speaking of Dhamma and the Buddhist teachings in Myanmar, the recent protests and uprising has really been a display of the rich Buddhist culture that has existed in Myanmar for so many years. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think the protesters in Myanmar chose to be peaceful, and they chose a non-violent way to show their feelings, to show what they really want. And it's all based on metta. Metta is a loving kindness. It is one of the basic things that you would learn when you study Dhamma. But what we are seeing is that the military is not acting the same way. Although they say that they're going to protect the religion and the country and whatsoever, but they are not following the teaching of Buddha. They don't show any loving kindness. What they're doing is just, I would say, it's crimes against humanity. And but I was moved to see the protesters are still very peaceful. And there are a lot of things that I would like to say to them. I know our country is in a very tough situation, and everybody is frustrated, tired, sad, scared, angry, and I'm feeling the same way from a very far place. I myself was also very surprised and angry when the military announced the coup. It is unacceptable. It is against the people's will, and it's a threat to democracy. I've been following the news closely since day one and have been actively participating in every way that I can. And but it's really sad that they have been killing people who don't really have any weapons, who are just peacefully shouting and chanting their feelings, what they want, and asking for their rights. They're not asking much. They're just asking for their rights. And we have seen the history repeating again and again, and we're not going to allow it this time. This is not 1988. This is not 2007. We are in 21st century. There is no room for dictatorship in this world. We have to fight it. And we're fighting along with the support of the international community. We're using new ideas, new technologies with the Generation Z in the front line, with the support of experienced Generation Y and X. And this is not an easy fight. I know that, you know that, and everybody knows that. This is not an easy fight. The military has weapons while the people have nothing but each other. But we have each other. Together we are strong. Together we can win this, and we will win this. This is not a fight between some political parties. We're against dictatorship. We're against crimes against humanity. We're fighting to get our rights back. We are fighting for democracy. It's going to take longer than we want it to be, but if we lose this time, we will be under the military dictatorship for decades again. So we will fight until we win, no matter how long it takes. There's no way back. We're fighting not only for us, but also for the future generation. And I want to say thank you to each and everyone who are in Myanmar sacrificing their lives for the country, for democracy, and for the people. When the soldiers and police who are supposed to be protecting us are actually killing us. And my gratitude also goes to the people who are helping us from outside the international community and everybody who's helping. And I would also want my people from Myanmar to know that people like us who are outside the country are also doing all the best we can, and our hearts are with them. International community also stands on the side of Myanmar people. It's just a matter of time. It's just a matter of time. Bad days will not last forever. We have to be patient. We cannot go violent. Justice will prevail soon. Military dictatorship will fall, and we will win. The people of Myanmar will win.
Thank you so much, Yimun. I agree completely. The military dictatorship is an old paradigm. It's outdated. And we will win because we have to win.
We will win.
Letter from a jail cell by Geza Wen. Dear Father, the river whose stomach was cut open has declared war on our tiny house on the bank, hasn't she? Right in front of the house, you must be looking out for someone who will help you with embankment poles to straighten the river, to fill her holes with sandbags. In the murky river which rises like a bamboo lance, you must be gazing at the sesame plantation, laden with fruits ready for harvest. You must be thinking a fistful of rice in your mouth is about to be fingered out. Maybe you will find solace in religion, contemplating our 5 foes. Maybe you will think of the void a son's labor can fill. 1 son, 2 daughters, and 1 son. The eldest is a poet in prison, the first daughter, a school teacher, the second, a graduate in the kitchen, the youngest, a student. Your poet son, is he even employable as the da you use to clear weed? Forgive nothing, Father, nothing. Son, Pochan, why do I hear noises behind you? You ask on the phone. I am at the bus stop to post a manuscript to a journal. I lied. From your liar son in the dock, to thugs who sweeten you with the tips of their tongues, to our benefactor peasants, because they want to have you from behind. Hate them all, Father, hate them all. A thief is unarmed, a thug is armed to the teeth. If thieves are ungovernable, if thugs are ungovernable, what's the point of government? Whatever happens to the jungles, whatever happens to the mountains, whatever happens to the rivers, they don't care. They love the country just the way they love to grate a coconut from inside out for coconut milk. Plinth by plinth, to make their throne taller, they will point their guns at the owner of the Lord Buddha's forehead. Their class is that crass. To cuss at that class, if your religion forbids you, allow me to lose that religion. I will turn the air blue on your behalf. Maybe you don't know yet. Your son was set up for demanding the so-called police not to harm ordinary citizens. Someday, your son, who is not a thief nor a thug, will become employable, good as your da that clears wheat. For now, Father, keep gazing at that plantation you'd plowed with your naked shoulders. Keep singing the anthem of the Peasant Union. Yours ever, Geza Wen, Cell 1, Section 10, Dayawadi Prison. Geza Wen, Town Degasa, Do Ape, Lu de Choja one by Bautratware Miha, Ganapuga Englego Yansha Nebi Mahola Ape. အင်္ဂလိပ်ရဲ့ရှေ့နာကမြစ်ကမ်းပါမှာမြို့တိုင်းစိုက်ဖို့ရေးစာဖြည့်ဖို့တဲအိတ်ချဖို့တယောက်ယောက်ကိုအဖေးမျောနေမှာပဲဝလုံးထိုးတက်လာတဲ့မြစ်ရည်ညင်ညင်မှာပြစ်ခဲနေအောင်လဲကျနေမဲ့ရိတ်သိမ်းရလို့နီးရေသွင်းနှမ်းခင်းတွေကိုငေးကြည့်ပြီးဝါးနေစေထမင်းလုပ်ကိုကလော်အထုတ်ခံရသလိုဖြစ်နေမလားရန်သူမျိုး၅ပါးအကြောင်းကိုဆင်ခြင်ပြီးအဖေမျက်နှိုးရဘာသာတရားနဲ့ဖြည့်တွေးနေမလားလစ်ဟာနေတဲ့တယောက်စာလှုပ်အားကိုပဲတောင်းတနေမလားသားတက်သမီးနှစ်သားတက်မှာသားတက်ကအချုပ်ကြကြပြဆရာသမီးနှစ်ကအကျောင်းဆရာမနဲ့ဘွဲရထမင်းချက်နောက်ထပ်သားတက်ကကျောင်းသားအဖေလက်ထဲကကိုင်းခုတ်ဓာတ်လောက်မှအဖေသားကြီးကြပြဆရာကအားဖြစ်စေရလားအဖေဘာကိုမှမခွင့်လွတ်ပါနဲ့အဖေရေသားရီဖိုးချန်နောက်ကလူသံတွေစူညံလှကြည်လားဖုန်းတွေကအဖေမေကွန်းကိုစာမှုပို့ရင်ကားမှတ်တိုင်မှာရောက်နေလို့လိန်ညာမိတဲ့တရားရုံးတွေကအဖေသားကအစကျေးဇူးရှင်တောင်းသူဦးကြီးများလို့ရှာဖျားကလေးနဲ့မြူပြီးမှကျိုးကိုချသွားတဲ့ခစ်ဆက်ဆက်ရဲ့ဓမြကောင်တွေအစုံအားလုံးကိုမုန်းပစ်လိုက်ပါအဖေလက်နဲ့မပါပဲပြည်သူဥစ္စာကိုခိုးဝှက်တော့တခိုးလက်နဲ့ကင်ထားပြီးပြည်သူဥစ္စာကိုလူရက်တော့ဓမြတခိုးအစိုးမရဓမြအစိုးမရနဲ့အဖေတို့မှာဘယ်မလဲအစိုးရတောတွေဘာဖြစ်ဖြစ်တောင်တွေဘာဖြစ်ဖြစ်မြစ်တွေဘာဖြစ်ဖြစ်အုံသီးချစ်တယ်လို့တိုင်းပြည်ကိုချစ်ပြပြီးအစီအနှစ်ကိုခိုးဆုပ်တဲ့လူဒန်းစားတွေသူတို့ပလင်ကိုတရစ်ချင်းမြင့်ဖို့ဆိုဖျားသင်းချစ်မှာတောင်တနတ်ပြောင်းနဲ့ထစ်မှတ်ပြီးညစ်ပတ်ခဲ့ကြတဲ့လူဒန်းစားတွေအဲ့ဒီလူဒန်းစားတွေကိုဆဲရေးဖို့အဖေဘာသာတရားကအဖေကိုခွင့်မပြုရင်အဲ့ဒီဘာသာတရားကနေကြောခိုင်းပြီးအဖေစာသားဆဲရေးပြရစီအဖေအခုအထိအဖေမသိသေးပေမဲ့အဖေသားကြီးဟာလူကောင်းသူကောင်းတွေအပေါ်အကြမ်းမဖက်ဖို့ရဲတက်ဖွဲ့ဆိုတာကြီးကိုတောင်းဆိုရင်းကမတရားတဲ့လမ်းကျုပ်ပုံမှန်တွေနဲ့ထောင်ထဲမှာအချုပ်ကျနေလေရဲ့ တနေ့မှာတော့တခိုးမဟုတ်တဲ့အဖေသားကဓမြမဟုတ်တဲ့အဖေသားကအဖေအတွက်အားလည်းဖြစ်ရပါစေမယ်အဖေဓာလည်းဖြစ်ရပါစေမယ်အဖေအခုနေမှာတော့အဖေပခုံးနဲ့ထွန်ရက်ထားပြီးရေလွှမ်းသွားတဲ့ရာမြေပြင်တွေကိုငေးရီကြည်မောရင်တောင်သူလယ်သမားတမကတချင်းကိုပဲစိုးနေရပါအောင်ဖေတာကေဇဝင်တာယာဝတီဘို့အချင်းတောင်စောင်း30ခန်းတက်
Hello, Pine. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hello, Ashley. Thanks for having me here. My name is Pine Tokan, and I'm from Burma. I was born and raised there. I spent 16 years of my lifetime growing up. That is before we moved to or migrated to Norway in 2006 with my family. I'm now 30. I still do have my family's and relatives remaining there in Burma. Well, I grew up in a city called Yangon, which used to be the capital for Myanmar, officially. And well, growing up as a kid, I say we were a little bit. We led a simple life. We weren't, very rich, but we weren't at the very, very poor. You could say we could sustain ourselves, or we lived like a middle level of lifestyle. So our people is usually kind of straightforward, I would say. We're very honest. We were sometimes really stubborn, I might say, and we are strong believers of karma, because most of us living in Burma are traditionally Buddhist. So we led the way of lives as in Buddhist teaching. So we might not be very religious at some point, but we led by the teachings of Buddhist monks throughout our years. So even as a kid, I might say we were lived by a code which is really hard for a kid to understand sometimes, like the precepts of Buddhism, and well, mainly the core of like Burmese lifestyle is based off Buddhist teachings. So as a kid, I mean, there were not much, of a rebel in you. We were taught not to be so defiant and very submissive to a point, and respecting the elder is very core fundamentals in Burmese in a Burmese kid's childhood. And I was just among one of those kids. So so you would say I was very submissive, very passive in some areas. We had constant contacts with monks and of elderly people. We lived really close bonds together in our neighborhood. That from where I grew up in, at least. So as a child, there's not much I could tell you about, like especially, but that I didn't think that was like like something special to bring it up. But when I got to Western countries, like where I live in now in Norway, and then I suddenly come to realization the lifestyle we led there was really, really different from how how kids are growing up here, so we had really close bonds between families, friends, neighbors, especially, and and there everybody knows everybody in the neighborhood. I would say they are all good and bad, and all sorts of people, but mainly Burmese people are simple, and really really easy to understand once you get to know them.
Thank you for sharing that, Vine. It sounds like it was a really close community where you lived in Burma. My next question is, what role has Myanmar played in your life? How has it impacted you, or what has it taught you?
The way we were taught from our childhood to to adult is that being kind to each other and believe in karma, and be nice to each other overall. We are very polite in a way, and we loved helping each other. Burmese people love donating things to 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 others that are in need, or monks in particular. This is where most of our donations goes to. The monks in Burmese culture is very. It played really a big role shaping Burma, Burmese culture. Because we do have quite a quite big population of them residing in Burma alone, and their main role to our country is that to spread the Buddhist teachings. So that's what they do. They do spread Buddhist teaching, and we grew up listening to those teachings, like since we were very little. We may not understand at first, but when you get to certain point, you starting to experience it, either experience it yourself, or started being able to relate to those teachings in your lives. So I might say I live by Buddhist teaching pretty much my whole life. I wouldn't call myself a very religious person, but I do believe and practice this Buddhist way of life. So we do have fundamentally like 5 precepts as a Buddhist: not killing, or avoiding alcohol, and we do have not telling lies, and avoiding those what would you say, improper physical contacts to people that are unwilling, and no stealing. That'll be 5 of our core principles in Buddhist teachings for everyone. So I think pretty much everyone in the world could relate to those teachings, but our moral foundations is based off of these 5 precepts, and well, I would say we live by those. Yeah, we live by those principles, and we grew up believing doing those will bring us good, fortune or merit to our life. And once we started going to school, we were, I wouldn't say harsh, but Burmese education system was a little strict compared to Western countries. Teachers back in the days were especially harsh, punishing kids back then. So there were occasional, beatings every now and then for not following rules or not doing homeworks, etc. And well, I did have my fair share of punishments since kids. So wasn't very good in class, but I wasn't very hard to discipline or control either. So it was I might just like normal kid being goofing around and being a brat every now and then in class. But we were very submissive, I would say, compared to kids in Western countries. So that way we grew up until became like 13, 14s, where we started to understand our own belief system and our way of lives, and what is being a Buddhist, what is being a person grown up in Burma. And we started comparing ourselves to people around the world and how we are as a person, and how people, and how we are different from others, so that we could understand how our real lives is unique and different from other countries.
All right. Thank you, Pine, for sharing. Lastly, do you have any encouraging words for people in Myanmar right now?
Yeah, if I have to say something to the people that are, especially to the people that are struggling in Burma right now, is that I want you to feel really proud and take pride in what you're doing right now, because there are no cause that I could think of would be more noble than what you're doing right now, risking your life out there for the good of many and for your own country. And I think that is such noble might be underwhelming or underrated word describe what you're doing. In coming years, in future, you may not have your names carved on walls or sing songs about you, but we will remember what you did this day for your country, and you will be the foundations of what our country gonna become in the future or bloom into. And this is gonna be the legacy you will be left behind for your children and their children's children's. And I also like to add something, or urge for those who haven't heard or joined the cause of what's happening in Burma right now. I urge you to participate. This is not the time to sit idly by and let things happen the way they are. This is a rare chance to be able to contribute for your country in the name of freedom and democracy. Some of us might not even be citizens of Myanmar in on paper anymore. It depends where you live, but our loves remain for the country, and as long as that love remains, and you can call this country your home. And no, you don't need to be out there protesting like everybody else. If that is not your thing, there are a lot of other things you could contribute and support on what are happening right now to come to get to the greater outcomes. So this is not too late to join and stand up to the bullies and make things right the way things were, and we could bring back our old glory days, and our sweet little countries back to the way it was. Thank you.
As a small, mostly volunteer team, the production time for a single episode of Insight Myanmar podcast can sometimes be as long as 4 months from start to finish. More recently, we've tried to increase the speed of this process for special episodes, but the fastest we've been able to manage has been around 3 weeks. During this current crisis, however, where even a single day can be so urgent, we simply don't have the luxury of waiting so long. We've worked around the clock to shorten this time frame, and some episodes have managed a turnaround of just 36 hours. Similarly, while our previous goal was to produce a podcast once every 10 days, we are now trying to put out episodes as soon as they finish, knowing how valuable it is to get these ideas out there at this critical time. However, we cannot accomplish this increase without your support. If you have found value in today's episode and think that others may also benefit from this type of content at this time, please consider making a donation so that we can continue our mission. If you would like to join in our mission to support those in Myanmar who are resisting the military coup, we welcome your contribution in any form, currency, or transfer method. Every cent goes immediately and directly to funding those local communities who need it most. Donations go to support such causes as the Civil Disobedience Movement, CDM, families of deceased victims, and the purchasing of protective equipment and medical supplies. Or if you prefer, you can earmark your donation to go directly to the guest you just heard on today's show. In order to facilitate this donation work, we have registered a new nonprofit called Better Burma for this express purpose. Any donation you give on our Insight Myanmar website is now directed to this fund. Alternatively, you can visit our new Better Burma website, which is betterburma.org, and donate directly there. In either case, your donation goes to the same cause, and both websites accept credit cards. You can also give via PayPal by going to paypal.me/betterburma. Additionally, we can take donations through Patreon, Venmo, GoFundMe, and Cash App. Simply search Better Burma on each platform and you'll find our account. You can also visit either website for specific links to those respective accounts, or email us at info@betterburma.org. In all cases, that's Better Burma, one word, spelled BETTERBURMA. If you would like to give in another way, please contact us. Thank you so much for your kind consideration.
Hello, Lily. Thank you for joining us. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, my name is Lily, and I'm from Burma. I was born in a city called Loei Kaw, which is in Gaya State in the north near the Thai border. My family is ethnically Chinese, so my first language is Toisan Chinese, and then learning to speak Burmese in school. My family immigrated to the U.S. when I was 5 years old. So what I remember about my hometown is what my home looked like. There was a guava tree in front. There was lush greenery in the backyard of my mom's shop. I remember the route to my grandmother's house, my aunts and uncles there. I remember the school I went to, where the classroom was a mix of kids of all different ages. There were wooden benches and tables and blackboards, and there were no toilets. It was just an outhouse. But it's a very hot tropical place, and Leka is in a valley, so it's surrounded by hills, and it gets foggy in the morning, and that's what I remember the most. But once I left, I landed in Pennsylvania and grew up in the Mideast, which includes Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Ohio. So I'm really a mix of all these different places that I've lived in, the different cultures and influences.
Yeah, that's really amazing that that you recall what your surroundings were like from such a young age in Burma. And what was that like for you, going from a small town in Leka to Pennsylvania?
Oh, well, it was adventurous. So for a 5-year-old, I didn't know what to expect. It was just that the contrast was really profound, where in Burma, you're pretty much playing in the dirt and you're barefoot. There's not many plastic toys or televisions or telephones at that time. So then suddenly, you're in South Philly, which is an urban setting, pretty diverse, but with a whole nother language around you. And suddenly you do have a telephone and a TV set, and that's like your world, looking out into a new culture and country. So I don't think I particularly liked it or disliked it. I just knew I wasn't used to things yet, and it probably took me a while to learn enough English to know what's going on or pick up on things. And slowly, my daily life as a kid was a mixture of family and food that was Burmese or Chinese, and then a little bit of what American culture was outside.
So it sounds like, culturally speaking, there was quite a difference between, the American culture and the Burmese culture. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, the Burmese culture, it feels like a slower pace. It feels still grounded in some ancient teachings. Burmese people that I've met in my life, family and friends, they're just very pure-hearted, gentle, and very generous. There's just this joy about them when they welcome you into their homes, and you have a conversation, and they'll love to just treat you to food or snacks, and it's just really easy to become friends with them. With American culture, it feels like it was hard to mix in with people. It's a whole new society, like the way it's set up, to feel like you're a part of it. It took probably years. It feels more fast-paced, more competitive, and you can kind of get lost in your daily lives with work and your commute and bills, or just busyness, that it doesn't feel like, well, you'd have to go out of your way to take some time out and go hiking and get in touch with nature again, that kind of thing.
So it sounds like when you moved to the US, it was a little harder for you to get integrated into the culture here, just because of the nature of it, busyness, and just more concerned about our own individual lives, perhaps.
When you're part of the immigrant experience is just, you have your circle of family and friends, and you're not going to be able to mix into the other groups of American life that quickly, because your parents have friends that are only Chinese or Burmese speaking. So as a young kid, then for those first few years, it was there was not much English going on in the house. So it was like a limited little micro world.
Did you think of home often in Burma?
Oh, yeah. I really missed my aunt, who I was really close to. And at that point, when you wrote a letter and mailed it, it took like 3 or 4 months before they received it. And then when they wrote back, it was another 3 or 4 months before I received it. We couldn't make it. I don't think we made international calls at that point. This was in the 80s. So it was really hard because it felt like, I don't know if I'm ever going to see them again.
Yeah. I think that during that time, Burma was under military control then, and there was very limited access that Westerners had to the country, and then also people in the country had very limited access to things outside of it. So it was very, very isolated. Well, I wonder if there were any certain memories that, would come to you after you moved to the U.S.
I could share a story of before we left Burma, when my parents were preparing paperwork and getting approved to immigrate. They had told me that we were just taking a trip, a short trip, and we were going to come back because they didn't want me to feel bad about leaving family members. But I kind of knew that we were leaving for good. So my dad had brought this magazine that was in English, and there was a picture of Jimmy Carter, who was the president of the U.S. at that time. And it was pixelated. So I have a very clear memory of looking at this picture, never seen an image that's made out of dots before. And my dad said, "This is the president of the United States, and that's where we're going." So I just sort of remember that moment because I felt like, great, that sounds good to me. And, not really having an idea of what the United States was like or what a president is. I just felt excited about this trip we're going to take. But I knew they were not telling the truth when they were telling me that it's just a short trip. But that was a memory for me because I really appreciate my experience here. I got to go back just once, and so that's the story I'd like to share. It was back in October of 2007. So at that point, it was about 20 some years since I've been there, and the city of Yangon, it wasn't very modernized. There were no tall buildings or elevators or escalators. I'm sure there was like one escalator in the city, but when you looked out into the city, it was still the original buildings that the British had built for homes. And when you were outside of the city, when we traveled, there were no modern sounds. I just remember thinking, like, I don't hear any traffic or airplanes. It was just all just a breeze or some birds and people talking. People didn't even have cell phones. Not many people had cell phones in 2007. So that was part of the culture shock for me when I visited. And I kind of just sunk into that moment to absorb a place that had no modern sounds. Like, that was really unique. I mean, there was no TV noise. There was no loud advertising. It was just nature and people. I mean, there were motorbikes and people did have cars, but it was just really nice to be able to have that comparison on that trip.
Yeah, I recall going back about that same time too and noticing that, a lot of people were still wearing the traditional clothes, the traditional longi, and there were still a lot of bicycles too. People were using bicycles and
Okay, so we landed in Rangoon, and my aunt and my cousin came to pick us up. And we drove through the night in Rangoon, and I noticed there were no tall buildings, and the air was this very humid, thick air. And there was hardly anybody on the streets anymore. And it was only about like 9 p.m. at night. There was also no women. I only saw men sitting in cafes or eateries. So those are my first images of being back in Burma. It was nighttime. It was really dark, like there's not that much electricity to see. Not many tall buildings, lots of stray dogs. And so we just settled into our apartment for the night. And then we woke up really early because our time was off to some prayers and chanting because I think we were in a Muslim neighborhood. And then I wanted to take a shower, but there was no shower. There was just a barrel of water. And you would scoop the water onto yourself, and that was your bath. And suddenly the electricity went off, and I was in the dark. So someone had to come and hold a flashlight so I could see. But it was the first time getting to know my aunt and my cousin, meeting them for the first time. And they're really lovely. Oh, I just wanted to describe our first night in Inlay. It's pitch dark practically, except for like a few light bulbs here and there in this restaurant cabin place we're staying in. There probably wasn't even any lights in the cabin. We had to use flashlights. So we had our dinner, and it was really delicious. It was like some beef curries, a tomato salad with some crumpled peanuts, and fish rice, which is the local dish for Inlay. And that's just fish, potatoes, and tomato that is crushed into the rice. And then you eat that with some kind of root and some puffed rice crackers. It was just really fresh and really yummy. And so as nightfall came, there was a full moon. So that was pretty much the main light. When you looked across the lake was the full moon, its reflection on the water, and you could see the distant hills, like different shades of dark blue and gray. And what I remember the most about that night, that first night staying there, was this music came on. So somewhere in the distance, somebody was playing a radio, and it was a man singing, and it sounded really ancient. Like the language that he was using, the intonations, was just not modern Burmese. It felt like maybe it was from the 1920s or 30s. And I knew right then and there that it sounded like a folk song, and that this was really a unique sound that I had never heard of, and I'm probably not going to find again. So I was trying to enjoy that as much as I could. And all I have of that night are some blurry photos because we had cameras, but they weren't very clear. But it was just a really mysterious place. It felt kind of ancient and majestic. All night, I just wanted to stay up watching the moon. And then like around 3 and 4 a.m., you would hear people with their motorboats coming because they were transporting things, and then the fishermen would come across for their early catch, and then that's how the day starts there. And that's how our day started.
Yeah, what was that like for you going from the US where you have, a lot of freedom to a place where you're restricted from going into certain areas?
Well, I wasn't used to it. What happened in Mobia was I was so bored after a few days that I wanted to go for a walk. And so we walked through the neighborhoods, noticing, little ducks and very neat houses, all bamboo. But when we wanted to cross the bridge, a soldier came out with his gun and yelled at us. So that was like the first evidence that there's something else behind the idyllic scenes that I was seeing, because it kind of caught us all off guard, and it kind of ruined the enjoyment. So there was the guard that didn't let us cross the bridge. Another memory was we were driving to Mandalay, and we saw these people in these white garments that went to their knees, but then their ankles were shackled, and they were working in the field all lined up. So I went to take a picture, but my aunt slapped my hand down. And she's like, don't look, don't take a picture. So that was like another indicator that there's a whole nother world that you don't see, or if you don't read about it or know about it, there's like an ugly part of the world there.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because for a lot of us that when we think about Myanmar, we see beautiful ancient pagodas and beautiful sunsets and hot air balloons and Shwedagon, which is, a very ancient, I think maybe the most ancient pagoda in the world. And yet there exists in Myanmar this other layer of just a dark, oppressive side that is usually kept out of the media, and yet it impacts everybody in the country. So I'm glad you brought that up.
So Burma is a land of contradictions. On the one hand, you have the religion or the spiritual practice and teachings of Buddha that a good percentage of the population follow and practice. And the people themselves are just peace-loving. They're jolly, good-natured people, very gracious. And it's really refreshing to be around Burmese people. I think it's really refreshing for me, coming from a Western world. Just like how simple they are. And they're just kind, very kind-hearted. But behind a screen is this military government that has ruled over the land for decades, and everyone knows that they're brutal and unjust, and they rule with fear and an iron fist. And the people have kind of just adapted to that over the decades, whether to live quietly until they can't take it, and there's an uprising or a protest. And every time it's a whole new generation that picks up. So I really feel for the generation that is up against the military this time, because I've watched or I've learned or read about or heard about stories from my parents, what it was like in the 1960s when the first coup happened. They there was even, that was when General Ne Win was in power, and he did this move where he changed all of the money from 10, 20s and $100, juts, to money that was divisible by 9, because he was told by an astrologer that it would be lucky for him. But so people lost their savings. It just wiped out people's savings, and people were angry. So he switched the rhetoric to blame it on the Chinese that lived in Burma. So there was a week of, this is not a protest, this was just scapegoating a group of people, where they attacked the Chinese population in the major cities in Burma in 1967. That's just a side story. I don't know if there was any protests in the 70s, but 88, 89, and then 2007 were other major protests, where it always ended with a major crackdown on the protesters. And it would always be violent. They would always be gunned down. And then they would hold on to power for, another few years. So here we are again with the same scenario, only this time Aung San Suu Kyi has been in the public eye for a couple of decades. And she was just trying to start the country off on the right footing of modernizing and rebuilding their economy, so that there's opportunity for growth and for people to gain skills, for modernization. And then bam, this general decides that he's going to take power back. I don't know if it's because he's trying to protect his wealth and his family, if he was afraid of getting indicted for things, if he really did retire. But it's just hard for a Westerner to believe that, someone could just disregard the election results and not care about the people itself, but just because he's greedy enough to just take over for his own gain.
So after that trip, what was it like for you coming back to the U.S.?
It was a feeling of relief. I felt a really sharp difference in comfort level. I knew that my life here was comfortable. There's no scary military in the background. I could visit any city, any state, and have a road trip here without having to ask permission, or I could have guests over at home with no troubles. So the clear differences of the freedoms I have living in the U.S. was just profound. So at the same time, I have a taste of what it's like to live there, not having these basic freedoms. I mean, it's hard to imagine. You've never been to a place. You could read about it, but to really live in a place where you can't move about freely, you have to get permission, you have to pay people under the table to do anything. And then to be in fear of, if you did have guests or foreigners in your house, that somebody might report you or things like that. It was just really pronounced for me. So And when I tell my friends, if you're going to travel to Myanmar or Burma, to just be prepared with that. It's not just the tourist sites. The people are going to be lovely, and the food's going to be delicious or interesting. The sights and smells, will really take you into another world. But it just, I don't know if you can get a sense of what it's like if you're only there for 2 weeks. Well, coming back here, I just really cared about what I could do in my local community, or to vote in every election, or to be up on what the issues are, and to have an opinion on things, and to talk about issues, because I know there's people that don't care about that. They just kind of take it for granted. And I realize that I don't, and it's because I'm coming from a place like Burma, where if my life was growing up there, I wouldn't be able to vote. And if I did, it might not be counted. And I wouldn't have all this opportunity to go to school or to learn anything about any of something that I want to.
Right. Yeah, I think in Burma, the news is something that has been very much restricted over the last several decades. So under a military dictatorship, you don't have access to news. And even if you do have access to news, it's not necessarily the truth. So you make a great point.
Oh, that's a really good point. Oh, no, you made that point. Yeah, even here, when I watch the news, I remind myself that, what would be another point of view, to consider other points of views, and whether the news source is motivated or trying to provoke fear in the viewers, if it's a reliable source. So, you have a gut feeling about this when you're listening to the news, whether, some people listen to the news and it just reinforces their beliefs and what they want to hear, stroking their ego, I think, because they want to be right about things. And they'll just keep listening to the same news source. So for myself, if it doesn't feel right, like I feel like this is dishonest, or what they're portraying is slanted and not just a clear explanation of facts of what's going on. So it's helped me to kind of train myself to be mindful of the news sources that I watch.
So in light of everything that's going on in Myanmar right now with the most recent military coup, what's your experience been like?
Well, I've had a really hard time with it. It was such a surprise. I had no clue that this would happen, although now that I read that people suspected that the coup was going to happen. Only because I knew that there's going to be a couple of weeks, 3 weeks at most, where people are allowed to protest without harm. And then I knew that the military is going to get organized and beat them down. And I just didn't know how bad it's going to be. I also know that Aung San Suu Kyi and the people follow the belief that nonviolence is what they want to follow. So you just know you have regular people of all backgrounds and ages in those protesting crowds, and they're not harming anyone. They're just asking to be recognized. And what they're up against are soldiers with all type of machinery and arms, set to kill. And not just kill, but beat people up. So it's like really hard for me to make sense of it and then how to react to it and not to get overwhelmed, because I want to stay clear-minded for if there is something that I can do, then I want to be ready for that. So we don't know how long this is going to last. I do know that there are international sources that are preparing or looking at ways that we can help from the outside. But for the people that are in Burma, Myanmar right now, I just want you to know that there's a good number of us outside of Burma that understand what you're going through, and that you're showing the world your courage and conviction, that you value your life and your country, and we can all relate to that. Your thirst for freedom, your right to have a voice in shaping your future, and to have your vote count. So all of us that are connected to Burma, we're going to try to find ways to support you going forward. For now, I would like to propose that in your daily meditation, as you start out your day, that you just take 5 or 10 minutes to imagine what you want your future to look like, your country to look like, what it would feel like, what does freedom feel like, what does living without fear feels like, and to imagine the country that you want to live in. There's a couple of good things that is coming out of this situation, and that is that there's unity among the ethnic groups, and everyone is focused against the ruling military right now. So I don't think that's ever happened before, where the whole country, where all of the states and all the ethnic groups are united. And there's evidence that more and more people are joining the movement, the CDM movement, including hundreds of police. I don't know about military soldiers yet, but I've heard a lot of reports that it's in the hundreds of police that are stepping away from their role and joining the people. So I think that's really key, that we need thousands. We need the numbers to be thousands of police and military to join the people. So I just wanted to read Aung San Suu Kyi's quote. She said, "My top priority is for the people to understand that they have the power to change things for themselves." So that really stands out for me, because oftentimes we think we are powerless and we want someone outside of us to just save us. But as Aung San Suu Kyi has led by example, she really had to believe in herself all of those years that she was under house arrest, and she's just steadfast in what she wants for her country. And I think all of us have to find that same conviction and belief and voice within ourselves, that no matter how bad things look for the time being, that you just have to find that belief in yourself and to watch out for each other and just keep going.
You've been listening to the Insight Myanmar podcast. We'd appreciate it very much if you could rate, review, and or share this podcast. Every little bit of feedback helps. You can also subscribe to the Insight Myanmar podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever else you get your podcasts to make sure you don't miss any of our upcoming episodes. If you can't find our feed on your podcast player, please just let us know and we'll ensure it can be offered there in the future. Also, make sure to check out our website for a list of our complete episodes, including additional text, videos, and other information available. at insightmyanmar.org. And I also invite you to take a look at our new nonprofit organization at betterburma.org. There was certainly a lot to talk about in this episode, and we'd like to encourage listeners to keep the discussion going. Make a post, request specific questions, and join in on discussions currently going on the Insight Myanmar podcast Facebook group. You're also most welcome to follow our Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter accounts by the same name. If you're not on social media, feel free to message us directly at info@insightmyanmar.org. Or if you'd like to start up a discussion group on another platform, let us know, and we can share that forum here. Finally, we're open to suggestions about guests or topics for future episodes. So if you have someone or something in mind, please do be in touch. We would like to take this time to thank everyone who made this podcast possible. Currently, our team consists of 2 sound engineers, Mike Bink and Martin Combs. There's of course Zach Hessler, content collaborator and part-time co-host. Ken Pransky helps with editing, and a special Mongolian volunteer who is asked to remain anonymous does our social media templates. In light of the ongoing crisis in Myanmar, a number of volunteers have stepped in to lend a hand as well, and so we'd like to take this time to appreciate their effort in our time of need. And we're always on the lookout for more volunteers during this critical time, so if you'd like to contribute, definitely let us know. We'd also like to thank everyone who has assisted us in arranging for the guests we've interviewed so far. And of course, we send a big thank you to the guests themselves for agreeing to come on and share such personal, powerful stories. Finally, we're immensely grateful for the donors who made this entire thing possible. We want to remind our listeners that the opinions expressed by our guests are their own and don't necessarily reflect the host or other podcast contributors. Please also note that as we are mainly a volunteer team, we do not have the capacity to fact-check our guest interviews. By virtue of being invited on our show, there's a trust that they will be truthful and not misrepresent themselves or others. If you have any concerns about the statements made on this or other shows, please contact us. This recording is the exclusive right of Insight Myanmar podcast and may not be used without the expressed written permission of the podcast owner, which includes video, audio, written transcripts, or excerpts of any episodes. Also not meant to be used for commercial purposes. On the other hand, we're very open to collaboration. So if you have a particular idea in mind for sharing any of our podcasts or podcast-related information, please feel free to contact us with your proposal. If you would like to support our mission, we welcome your contribution. During this time of crisis, all donations now go towards supporting the protest movement in Myanmar through our new nonprofit, Better Burma. You may give by searching Better Burma on PayPal, Venmo, Cash App, GoFundMe, and Patreon, as well as via credit card at betterburma.org/donation. You can also give right on our Insight Myanmar website, as all donations given there are directed towards the same fund. And with that, we're off to work on the next show, so see you next episode.
Yeah. the massive man at this on a bee. I don't let them make you doing it up your like 2 to pay my me to them you will look on fuck your pull up. They might go me doing a taco yanga sound. The nene meow they go to jail. And I see I don't damn on it take home. Twice it loudest, worldwide the Yoma. Shit in me no sound, me no piano, shit in a pido. I don't need a hit. Shame won't tell me, man. Mango Quilo, lazy dome. I don't join women. Pido with an MP, make on it go to the fighting head. And I see snitch out so yeah. Democracy, piano, yashi, yeah. Pido, and I pido, piano, I don't play, I don't try, I don't hit, and I see snitch out so yeah. Democracy, piano, yashi, yeah. Pido, and I pido, piano, I don't play, I don't try, I don't hit, Now you be me. Oh, see, long on a way. A gong sing code. Oh, yeah, need it. Thou dine. Not always swear the mother. February 第1年了，你想忙带天天蹲下比挨着马西安那怎样？忙碰个开面追，你就说我那么逞强，当狗呀，现在心一看了没有？黑他那的美貌，是真骚，偏不得眼睛还玩的 NK 呢，妈妈洗的谁？俺那现在我记来不就嘛是怎么搞 ？Generation Z 人家呢，你按年洗的家了，记得的你也面这个，第三天比那啥面呢？对全家谁个比上落妈妈占米，对么多结果一路不熬夜米哈，老爸没理去，干嘛不去？前面的俺那心是那个三斤不多送我哈心对没？你们你那拖开家阿鲁兰毛股，俺那兄弟的路路足够碰没也不多。比如三大个个把地用表面 ，We want justice， 咱们路不迷路，在他路过呀的，看那古的个贵的大的 super 专利兵，俺的music搞到 democratic 俺那边，弄那么 generation 嘛都提了包那么别谁呀路哎也是把脱带变面，阿鲁变他对你他变，比如你把路你家的，俺那兄弟个俺都米波拉手你家的，对送给的你对我搞朋友。 俺那是你家兄弟呀喂，俺那是你家兄弟。